Welcome to session 2 of the European Day 2022. My name is Katarzyna Wardal. I'm EU Public Affairs Manager at Knauf Insulation, and I will be your moderator. Traditional buildings with grey roofs treat rainwater as a waste product. At the same time, climate change impacts rain patterns, which means that cities are experiencing more intense rainstorms. This means more stormwater to treat by sewage systems, hence more energy use. Blue-green roofs can help to mitigate all those negative impacts by restoring the natural water cycles and reducing energy needs for cooling our buildings and for stormwater management. Now I would like to introduce our speakers who will discuss how green infrastructure can boost cities' resilience to extreme weather events. We have today with us Mrs. Trudy Higgins, Policy Officer, Water Industry at DG Environment at the European Commission. Mr. Gilles Namur, Second Deputy Mayor in charge of nature in the city of Grenoble. We also have with us Anna Zakrisson, Scientific Researcher, Green Roofs Diagnostics, and Mr. Harzmann, Managing Director. And Sirpa Pietikainen, who just joined us. We are happy to have you with us, Mrs. Pietikainen, who is member of the European Parliament involved in the Environment Committee of the Parliament, involved in several files that are important for our discussion today. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Trudy Higgins, who will give us an overview of green infrastructure benefits for urban or wastewater management and state of play of the revision of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. Mrs. Higgins, the floor is yours.
Good morning and thank you. I'll just share my screen, so just please wait a moment.
Yes.
Let's see. Okay. Are we good to go? Yeah. Can you see my screen okay?
Not yet.
Okay. Oh, no. Sorry about that. I'll try again. Okay. How's that? Yeah.
Perfect.
Great. Okay. Sorry about that. Good morning to everybody. And thank you for this invitation to present at this session of today's Green Infrastructure Day. I've been asked to share with you the Commission's ongoing work with regard to the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. Just to recap on the current directive, it's an end-of-life directive with a focus on point sources. There's three main pillars: collection, treatment, monitoring, and reporting. It is a technology neutral directive. And in 2019, we carried out an evaluation of the current directive. And in conclusion, we found that the implementation did result in significant reductions in pollutant releases. However, there's no detailed provisions for stormwater overflows. And in the time since 1991, the EU Water Acquis has significantly broadened with the Water Framework Directive, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, and others. So there is a need to modernize the current directive. Just a brief explanation of where we are at. The Commission is currently working on the development of a legislative proposal. So for today, we cannot tell you anything on the proposal. This work started in 2019, and this is the methodology that we've followed throughout. So we're currently at the last step there, which is the drafting stage. We've done extensive data collection and stakeholder consultations in developing policy options. And in our analysis, we have worked with the JRC, you met Emmanuel earlier on, and the OECD quantification of costs and benefits of various solutions. I'd like to point out that the greening of urban areas, there are multiple benefits, but it can be difficult to monetize all of those benefits. But we are aware, for example, of a recent study in Berlin demonstrating a willingness to pay approach in that quantification. So at present, we're at the drafting stage. We're planning to finalize the proposal this year, And once accepted by the Commission, the ordinary legislative procedures will be followed. So the Commission will submit the proposal to the Council of the EU and the European Parliament, and from there. So to recap, there's a number of lessons learned from the implementation of the current directive. The review will provide, going forward, we hope, predictability to the water sector, urban planners, amongst others, on the legal requirements for the decades to come, so that necessary investments can be planned in due time. And I guess in 2022, we're green and digital. So just to briefly highlight in terms of the European Green Deal, some relevant activities. I'll start with the Zero Pollution Action Plan, which was adopted last year. It sets out a roadmap for achieving zero pollution, directly linked to the implementation of policies on air, water, marine, and soil. And one of those actions includes this revision of the directive. There is the chemical strategy towards a toxic-free environment, pharmaceutical strategy, the strategic approach to pharma in the environment. With the biodiversity strategy, obviously water pollution reduction leads to direct beneficial effects on ecosystems, and then the EU climate adaptation strategy, climate proofing, resilience building, prevention and preparedness. Going back to our directive, back in October 2021, we would have presented a range of options to an open stakeholder conference. And what I'm doing here is revisiting that with you. So where we're looking forward, it's in three main tranches: remaining pollution, which I'll go into a bit more detail in the next slide on, new challenges, and on that maybe greenhouse gas emissions and energy usage. I point out that for collecting systems, whereas they aren't as predominant as for wastewater treatment plant facilities, there's embedded carbon, there are direct emissions, and the energy usage of conveying flows to treatment. And under modernisation and governance, to point out that digitization does lend itself to more effective and efficient operations, monitoring and reporting. So with remaining pollution, in the evaluation, we did quantify what these other areas of pollution that could be further addressed going forward would be. 5 main areas. We quantified them in terms of load for BOD, nitrates, phosphates and coliforms, including urban runoff and stormwater overflows. There's also issues with non-compliance with the current directive, small agglomerations and small individual and appropriate treatment systems. So we have a basis going forward, because everything we do is an evidence-based, whether it's to do with the science and the modelling or cost-benefit analysis. And also of relevance to point out would be, and this is from the second River Basin Management Plan cycle, 2016, both stormwater overflows and urban runoff are significant pressures, and they could be expected to increase due to further effects of urbanisation and climate change. Obviously, the situation can differ from one wastewater agglomeration to another, depending on local conditions and how the collection system in place would operate. So a revised directive could directly contribute to achieving objectives of good ecological status and good chemical status. Again, to wrap up, and looking forward towards some possible solutions, again, from our previous stakeholder engagements, which some of you may have been involved with, we have presented an outline of approaches that can tackle stormwater overflows and runoff. So there are strategic, the integrated approach. There are some very good EU examples out there, but it wouldn't be the case that at the moment it's systematically applied across all member states. The approach lends itself to better planning of infrastructure, leading to the delivery of infrastructure that is fit for purpose and future-proofed as much as possible. This approach does require a number of competencies, including wastewater operators, urban planners, those responsible for monitoring water bodies, for example. It could include a lot of collaboration and coordination across various stakeholders at strategic and local level. It can reduce the amount of stormwater runoff collected through source control. There's an opportunity also to treat urban discharges more locally. And a lot of this type of work that's in place already requires a lot of mapping, predictive modeling, and even time control. And that covers the first policy with the Water Framework Directive, looking at significant pressures, delivering direct improvements where there is a clear evidence base to do so. And this would provide adaptability linked to changes in water bodies. And a fourth approach can be around guidance on strategies where the Commission would provide a framework for guidance to be delivered. So in conclusion, to say that we do understand that optimal solutions in complex urban areas can need to be case specific. And now in 2022, it can be that green, blue, grey solutions with digital real-time controls can deliver. So I'll leave that with you for today. There's some links to some publications we have already in this area. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this directive. There was an option on mandating agglomerations of certain size of population to have a strategic plan to manage stormwater overflows and urban runoff based on prevention and green infrastructure. Is this option still on the table?
Yes. So I think in my penultimate slide, I identified 4 main options. The first of those, which I went into detail on, was exactly what you've described, an integrated planning approach, which can bring in, depending on how the solutions develop, green infrastructure. So yeah, and again, to reinforce, we have our legislative, our impact assessment or legislative proposal. We're still working through that. So later this year, we'd expect that we'll have something to share.
Okay, thank you. That's perfect, because we also have representatives of the cities with us, and I would like to now. So thank you, Mrs. Higgins. I would like to now turn to Mr. Namur from the city of Grenoble, from France, and ask him about his city's experiences with urban green infrastructure. Mr. Namur, what the city of Grenoble has been doing to integrate green urban infrastructure, in particular in reference to stormwater management? Was this the most important aspect of implementation of green infrastructure? Is this important? What's the feedback from the citizens and from civil society actors? And again, welcome to our event.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to participate to this event. Today, the city of Grenoble is leading a very proactive policy of greening in the city in order to try to adapt the city to climate change. The climate change that is twice more felt here in the Alps than elsewhere. Urban projects are at the heart of this policy, and the greening of the building on facade or roof appears to be an essential link of nature in the city to limit the impact of the buildings that we build or that we keep. I'm not really going to talk about very specific example, but rather I'm going to describe the political actions that we are taking to promote the establishment of green infrastructure. The city therefore carries out various actions at different levels. For example, building greening instruction for building permits. We have adopted a strategy for tackling urban heat island with 2 objectives: greening new development areas and also reducing land take in the city. The municipality started imposing green ratio each plot, and the local urban plan innovating by imposing 20 to 40% green area ratio on each plot, depending on the area, of course. With 10 to 20% open area ratio, with, for example, more than 50 centimeters of soil, and for all new construction. And this green area ratio has been reinforced now as high as 60% of green area on a plot. And this high requirement in terms of green areas is an incentive to creating green roof and facade. In the new urban planning project, 80% of the building permits delivered, including green roof. The municipality is also leading by example and has green many public buildings like some schools, the roof of the town hall, and also the terrace of the city center library. The service Nature in the city examine part of building permits and prior declaration. We also provide architectural and landscape requirement. We determine the specific rules that must monitor all developer and promoter working on the perimeter of the concerted development zone, and give them example to achieve this. For example, we have a new important concerted development zone that is called Flaubert, and this prescription were particularly advanced on the greening of the building to achieve the objective of preserving biodiversity, but also the neighborhood health. 20 centimeters thick roof minimum greenery, green facade, fully real function ecological, installation also of nesting boxes, a recommendation for integrated roof, biodiverse or biosolar, but also urban agriculture, for example. Green facade have also been used in another concerted development zone that is called Grand Châtelet to dress, in fact, all the ground floors. And this year, we work on the architectural and landscape specification for the 4 concerted development zones for further introduce a greening of building. We have now also a systematic reflection by the municipal real estate department on roof greening during a waterproofing renovation, for example, and this has been the case in last year for the Grenoble Museum, also Conservatory of Grenoble. So a lot different collaboration between different services that have been put in place between with the service Nature in the city, which is really important for us to have their implication in all those projects. Regarding flood risk adaptation and plot-based rainwater management, we have developed different programs. And for example, the rainwater and roof water infiltration system are installed on municipal buildings as possible, in particular new construction or renovation. This was the case for the school, Clemenceau School, a total of 583 square meters out of the 1,500 square meters of roofing will have been disconnected from the wastewater network to go to permeable the soils as part of this project. And this is the case for a lot of new projects. So this is why it is important. In fact, Grenoble is a small city if we consider the surface, but it is one of the densest in France. This is Grenoble is wedged between 3 mountain ranges, and if we want to avoid urban sprawl, the city must become ever denser and it is difficult to create new green space, breathing space or freshness. So this is also why we need to work on building in order to provide greening facade, greening roof. For this greening roof, there is a different case. For example, when you can have access, when you cannot have access to the greening roof, it may be interesting to add solar panels that all benefit for both the roof with less maintenance and also more yield for the panel due to the greening of the roof. On the contrary, when you make the roof accessible, the roof that has been greening and are now accessible, with a planter over 30, 80, or even more 110 centimeters of soil, then it confers the advantage of revegetation and allows the occupant of the building to enjoy privileged space on the roof. This space are shared, can be used to create a space for relaxation, collective gardening, hosting activity economy also, and the cost of security device to be put in place. So lots of advantage coming from that. Regarding feedback from the citizen, I don't really have any feedback from citizen or local actor on the building greening project in Grenoble. We have on the EcoCity certified Presqu'île district, we have an open loop of 70 groundwater. It's pumped with an efficient water discharge pipework that has been tested, and we have the first autonomous building for citizens in France that has been built. And we have received very positive feedback from the inhabitants of this very innovative building, exemplary in terms of water and energy consumption, with nevertheless required change in habits and behavior of the part of the habitant, but they feel very happy to be there. Also, for years now, the city of Grenoble has had a heat wave plan. Among various actions put in place, we have the provision of public activities such as free access to museum, for example, to invite residents to come and take cool break, thanks to either to the air conditioning of the building, or, and this is more virtuous, due to the good thermal insulation of certain buildings. And this is very appreciated by Grenoble residents, in particular the most fragile and the elderly. So it shows how important it is to work on this project in order to have a good insulation, thanks to vegetation, for example.
Thank you, Mr. Namur. This is really exciting and impressive. I think the aspect of well-being, aesthetics, the possibility of enjoying green spaces also on people's own buildings is something that is quite visible from what you were saying, that one does not need to live in suburbs, having to commute to work every day to enjoy green spaces. So I think that was quite clear from what you said. I'm just wondering, and we have a question from Luigi Petito here, whether this approach in Grenoble is the trend across France right now, or do you feel like there are other cities following the example you just gave from your own city? Is this something which is becoming trendy?
Well, I'm not sure that if the example of Grenoble can help other cities on this subject. Grenoble has received the European Green Capital label this year for all its proactive environmental policies. But this label is not just a reward. It is above all a booster to do more, to do better. And this makes it possible to launch more ambitious projects, to meet a lot of people, to share on this subject, and therefore to be inspired. So I can only invite everyone to follow, to participate to the various events organized throughout this year, and do not hesitate to come to Grenoble. However, I would like to highlight the way in which cities have appropriated this subject and become a driving force by proposing a set of great ideas. In fact, this is undoubtedly due to the fact that the citizen participation in Grenoble is strongly promoted, in particular thanks to a set of mechanism made available to them, like a participatory budget, like also some construction site open to the public, independent citizen council. Which are done because pushed by the citizen within the framework of this mechanism. And we have a lot of very good examples, like the project that was called Cool Roof, that is painting the roof of building, of public building, white, that helps to cool the city and mitigate the effect of global warming. It was coming from citizens. Also, we have some example of vegetation suspending above the street. We have some roof greening. We have urban farming, hanging misting also. This is very interesting. Vegetating parking, hive on the roofs, and also a new project that asks us to measure the consumption of the energy consumption and water consumption of public buildings. So I would therefore tend to want to value this approach if it is not the case in other cities. So do not hesitate, trust the collective intelligence.
Thank you very much, Gilles. I would like to now turn to Mrs. Pietikainen, who is a member of the European Parliament, as mentioned before, involved in the Environment Committee. And Mrs. Pietikainen, there are several policy and regulatory files that are under negotiation right now that could be instrumental to promote the deployment of green infrastructure, such as the Energy Efficiency Directive, such as the Energy Performance of Buildings, the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive that we just heard about, the Nature Restoration Law. Are you following some of those files? Is the European Parliament supporting urban green infrastructure? And personally, what's your point of view, whether the parliamentary positions are have some potential to make those Commission proposals even greener? The floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for giving the opportunity for me to address on the behalf of the Parliament in these questions. Well, first of all, I would say that hopefully the Parliament is greening the Commission's proposal. And another hope what we have in Envy Committee is that we could sort of create this kind of a system thinking what we heard already in two previous addresses. Because now quite often, and that is understandable, be it in the Commission or be it somewhere else, people tend to be focused on one subject, be it Fit for 55 or energy efficiency or wastewater or whatever. And then you would need to try to see how these elements are fitting together and supporting together. And with the wastewater directive, the new sort of approach, I think that there's a good attempt on this. Okay, what we have been done in the Parliament is to try to bring these interlinkages and these ecosystem services and the nature services and how they could be better used and upgraded, for example, in wastewater, but that is also noise. It's also pollution. It's also controlling the heat waves and the wind. It is also supporting the biodiversity. And that matter, energy efficiency can be dealt with greening of the buildings and urban environments. So there are multiple services what the green infrastructure actually provides. And so, yes, I hope that we can take that on board in these separate legislations. But then again, I'll bring two problems on the table and the Parliament's initiative of having a year of the green cities, greening the cities. And this is still open in the Commission. Will it come and how it will come, and do they have the resources for that? But we feel very strongly together as a group of parliamentarians who worked with this year that it is crucial and essential, because there you can get the system approach where you can see that, okay, you need to fit together energy efficiency, solar panels, the reuse of the waters in buildings, sewage water treatment, and the green roofs, the green walls, the greening of the urban sector. And then you would need to see that actually it counts multiple benefits. Of course, this regulation of winds, regulation of heat, regulation of pollution and oxygen. It actually could be one of the biggest in Europe areas what we can sort of reinvent for to act as sinks. And actually it would bring quite a lot of benefits for people living in urban areas, like we heard from Grenoble, especially when our societies are getting older. Sometimes it is only your park bench 10 meters from the door, or your balcony or rooftop that you can access. And that matters a lot. And so we would need to have this as a crucial element about the Bauhaus also. What is the good living environment? Plus then, of course, it has the impact that it increases the value of buildings and houses. And you all know that about the same value and same kind of an apartment costs less in very ugly and dingy environments compared to one that has a greenery around it and a possibility to access outside and so on. So it brings that kind of a competitive advantage. It brings this kind of a rehabilitation possibilities in some urban areas that are not in good condition at the moment. And it can create a lot of personalities. And the last but not least, and this is the big fight, is what do we do, or what tool do we then have in Europe, is spreading the word, the best practices, but we do not have the competence on urban planning. And this is a big, big defect that I hope we could discuss at some point on the EU level, whether that would be needed. I think it would.
Thank you very much. These are important points. You mentioned the European Year of Greener Cities, which was supposed to be designated already in 2022. Do you have any updates on this initiative? Have you been in touch with other parliamentarians, with the European Commission on this? And what you mentioned about green urban planning could be one of the great topics actually of such an initiative. So do we know anything more about this European Year of Greener Cities?
Unfortunately not, so please go ahead and ask it from the Commission as well. I put a written question to a Commission, what are the updated plans? Haven't gotten yet the answer. And I've discussed it with the different DGs already earlier last week. I discussed it with the Franz Timmermans and asked for his help to sort of kick it off a bit. So let's see. I'll hope that it gets moved forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So since we have a representative from the European Commission, do we know anything about maybe this initiative, European Year of Greener Cities, from DG Environment?
I'm afraid that I'm not from the unit that would be responsible, so I couldn't give a direct answer on that or with an update. Mm-hmm. But I've taken note. Super. Thank you very much. Yeah. In this case, thank you very much. So thank you. I would like now to turn to our next speaker, Mrs. Anna Zakrisson, scientific researcher at the Grenoble Diagnostics. Mrs. Zakrisson, given your experience, could you please tell us about monitoring and demonstration of green infrastructure benefits, since you are using scientific tools
and to measure them. And maybe you have some more details about what is important really for this session, which is natural water retention and detention. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the previous speakers and also probably the speakers coming after me, because I think this is a great event. So yeah, so I work for the hydrology lab at Green Roof Diagnostics. So we are a private but independent research institute, and we are trying to get as much data as we possibly can in order for the industry to make data-driven design decisions, or to make data-driven design decisions, and that we have enough data to actually prove or disprove things. So now we need to be able to design a optimal green roof to the location where the green roof is located. So this kind of like one size fits all strategy does not really work, especially now when we also have to factor in a lot of climate action coming up over the coming years, negative climate action, I mean. So basically, we have focused a lot on retention and detention because it often starts with the water. If there's not enough water available, then of course these are living things. The green roof dies. So we need to make sure that the roofs are designed to the climate so that there's enough water available for the plants that we choose to plant, and also for the profile that we choose. And also to make sure that, you know, keeping that balance between load and profile, so that because different projects have different load requirements. And of course, if we put a super heavy roof on a building that cannot take it, then of course there will be a lot of extra building material, often concrete, used in order to support that. And that's basically something that with a little bit of data and a bit of knowledge we can avoid. And I think the industry is really great in already achieving this. That is just a little notice that I would like to make. So now, retention is the water that is captured by the green roof, as has been already mentioned by previous speakers. And there has been previously some rather maybe rough estimations used and measuring methods that might not be completely sufficient for actually what happens on the green roof. It's a living thing, so it's kind of complex, and we need to use modeling to actually really show what happens hydrologically on the roof. So previously, for example, the test ASTM E2399 and the FLL equivalent have been used to state a certain retention value for a green roof, but it's not actually what the test does. It is basically a test to determine the maximum load or weight of the roof. So and I know that most of the industry don't use this anymore either. So there's a lot of willing from the industry to better measuring methods. Other methods that can be used is, for example, to use crop coefficients, like use long-term monitoring, understand what is going on, model this. You can use crop coefficients also combined with modified Penman-Monteith equations in order to get much better estimations on retention capacity of green roofs. But yeah, they were around like 50%, sometimes even higher, which is amazing. Green roofs are real workhorses. They're not just pretty, they're pretty workhorses, and they can provide a lot of things. And one thing some of the green roofs also provide, not all of them, is also a detention capacity. We've spoken a little bit earlier as well about stormwater management. So retention can basically reduce, maybe I can just show you a slide on this because it's much more easy to understand if I just show this. Otherwise it becomes so hypothetical. So let's see here if I can just get the right slide up. Here we go. So about half of the precipitation volume is represented by 80% of the storms, which means that there are tiny showers, drizzles, and nice events. So and green roofs have absolutely no problem taking care of these, and this precipitation is used to cool the cities and reduce the total runoff volumes that ends up in the sewers. But then we still have about 50% of the volume represented by 20% of the events, and these are the ones that are extreme weather events. You can see a microburst here on the picture. And they basically cause flooding. And when these events occur, the green roof can be oversaturated, or maybe it's a multiple day storm event where the green roof is already saturated when it starts raining. So for this, we need a capacity of the roof that is basically slowing down of the runoff. Different types of green roofs or different types of roofs that can achieve this, like blue roofs, blue-green roofs, purple roofs, and so on. So this is a different issue. So there are two stormwater issues. One is the reduction of the annual volume that ends up in the sewers, which is really positive for the cities. But then there is also what I would like to see more as a project related issue where you need to satisfy the requirements of your stormwater engineer. That can be, for example, through a stormwater tank with a restriction, an orifice restriction, so that you know that the outflow is always keeping within the limits of 10 liters per second and hectare, which is often common in most cities. Manage your stormwater on a roof, which basically means that the space on the ground can be used for other development or whatnot. So I can maybe show you just a picture of this. For example, here, like we had examples in New York City where they had massive stormwater tanks underneath the building. So you can free up that space, manage stormwater on the roof, and then you basically have a lot of space available for income generating activities that can basically create an ROI for the roof. So, but in order to do this, we need really, really solid data, because stormwater engineers are not satisfied or happy with gut feelings or hunches. And there's another thing as well, is that the runoff coefficients that currently are in use, especially here in Germany, they simply, if I may speak frankly, they do not actually represent or show, they're not useful actually for green roofs. They were developed in order to size pipes. So when they're used for green roofs, we actually do not really get the full story. And especially if we are talking about the tension type roofs, because the runoff coefficients, they assume a linear relationship between what is going in and what is coming out of the roof. And if you have a system that is actually the whole point of the system is to have an built-in delay, there's no linear relationship anymore. So the runoff coefficients is something that I hope will be abandoned at some point, and proper stormwater modeling will be used, which is used in most other stormwater purposes. It looks very different from country to country within the EU as well. So, but this is something that, yeah, I think would be very, very useful for everybody, because it also opens up the possibility for an ROI for especially detention type green roofs. Yeah, that's maybe what I have to say about that.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I would like to now to give the floor to Mr. Uwe Harzmann, Managing Director of Optigruen. Uwe, it's great to have you with us. You are a great expert and supporter of the European chapter of the World Green Infrastructure Network since the beginning of the creation of the European chapter. And you are representing industry here, industry producers of urban green infrastructure. So the question to you is the following. Can you share some case studies, practical examples of green roofs used for stormwater management and climate adaptation? And what kind of signals would you need from policymakers to allow for upscaling of the more uptake of green infrastructure in the cities?
Okay, thank you very much for having me. Thank you for all the speakers we already heard. There were really good insights, and also the ideas of Anna, which I just heard, was totally right. We need to get more into stormwater modeling just in order to use statistic data, which is not really proper for proper usage of blue-green infrastructure. yes, I prepared some slides just in order to give you an example what's possible already in the industry. It's not that this is just in the phase of inventing it. We claimed a patent 25 years ago for the first retention roof, but at that time nobody was interested in it. So the patent is gone now, but we are still there. So so it's really already standard in the industry. But what we are missing is the broad knowledge in the politics, in local governments, and of course in the local public. But this is something we are working on, and the conference like that definitely helps to increase the knowledge in this field. Okay, just in order to give you some examples. This is a short presentation. Maybe a couple of words before I start about Optigruen. Optigruen is in the market for green roofs since 50 years now. So we started back in 1972. Last year in 2021, we greened about 4.5 million square meters of green roof, which were about 8,000 buildings. So just in order to give you an idea what is possible. So it's really something standard. The only thing we do is green roofs. So that's what we know. We are not into green walls, but we definitely focus on green and green blue infrastructure. Just to show you how those systems are built up. This is common in the industry. It's not Optigruen specific. Our other partners in the market have similar systems. So this is basically what we do on the rooftop, which has to be, unfortunately, at least for those retention roofs, it has to be a 0-degree roof. This is the first problem we are facing in some markets. There are countries like Austria, for example, or also Belgium. They have problems with 0-degree roofs. They like to have 2% or more. So this is the first thing we need to do. And then what is basically done is you have a drainage and water storage layer, which is basically a system where you can store up to 95% of the water which falls. On top of that, you have a filter layer and a substrate. You can combine it with solar. You can use it for extensive green roofs, which have low maintenance, but you also can combine it with intensive green roofs where you can have parks and urban farming and ponds and playgrounds and whatsoever. And of course, you always can combine it with traffic areas. On every roof which is used you need to have some traffic areas and terraces and so on. So you can combine it, but the principle is always the same. The rainwater is stored underneath in these elements, which are between 60 and 150 millimeters high, and then of course they can store from 55 to 140 liters per square meter. So that's the principle. This is our idea how we could build resilient cities for the future. So what we do is we do a combination of green roofs and underground tanks and infiltration units. And the basic idea is that we store the water on the roof. We have a flow restrictor in the roof, and then if the roof the water if the rainfall comes, then the flow restrictor keep some of the water on the roof, and the excess water goes in these underground tanks and infiltration units. And if we need water on the roofs, then we pump it up again. So what our idea is that we can restore this natural water cycle. This natural water cycle, basically for Europe or the middle of Europe, is about 70% of evaporation, 20% of infiltration, and 10% of runoff. Depends always on the area a little bit and where we. But this is so the rough figure which we try to restore. So 70% is evaporation. Most of the water should be evaporated, and of course by evaporating the water you have all those cooling effects. You have this effects of a healthy plant growth and so on, all the effects for green roofs. And our overall aim is that we don't need any sewer connection. It doesn't work in all times, depends on the property size, depends on the local requirements, but this is the overall aim. And for the future, which is already there, but you probably know building industry is pretty conservative, so it takes some time. Our idea is that we have a smart control based on the weather forecast. That means we store the water on the roof and in the underground tanks, and if there's a heavy rainfall predicted, then we open up the valves before the rainfall. So we empty the roofs and the underground storage, and then when the rainfall starts, all roof and the whole system is empty, and we can store all water which comes down. And let's say if we have a storage capacity of maybe 80 liters or 80 millimeters of rain per square meter, you know that an 80 millimeter storm event is a very heavy one. So this definitely can help prevent flooding. So those systems, they are in place. This is one of our most important business right now. It picked up maybe 7-8 years ago, and I just show you just 2 examples which we did lately. This is a case study in Nuremberg called Eberhardshöfe. The whole property here was newly developed. This used to be industrial usage before, so everything was teared down, and then they developed a housing area. This was built in 2020, and the whole area has about 4,700 square meter of retention green roof intensive. These are those areas below here or here, parking underneath, and about 6,950 square meter retention green roofs extensive. These are the areas up here. And as you can see, it's a multi-story apartment complex. And then what we always do for projects like that, we do calculate a total water balance. This is based on stormwater modeling. It's not using those values from DIN norms or other European norms. This is based on 30 years of past rainfall every 5 minutes. So you can buy those data. We put in those data in our simulation model, and based on the past rainfalls of the last 30 years, we can calculate this total water balance. And in this case, we had a average rainfall per year of 600 millimeters in Nuremberg area, 0 runoff, infiltration of 167 millimeters, and evaporation of 435 millimeters. And this is basically close to this natural water balance. So infiltration 25% and 75% evaporation. This was done on this project. The next one I show, this is the office building. It's in Karlsruhe in the southwest of Germany. It's a headquarter of a insurance company. It was built in 2018. Here we have a combination of solar green roof. You can see them up here and here. This were about 507 solar panels. Don't ask me about the megawatt peak, but this is quite a decent size. And then we have a 2,000 square meter retention roof intensive. This is this area here, and it's combined green and pavement areas. Here you can see some terrace for the canteen or to have a coffee, and the total looks kind of similar. Here we have an annual rainfall of 740 millimeters in Karlsruhe. It's and then we here in this case we have a runoff 10%, 75 millimeters. So there's a connection to the public sewer system. We have infiltration of about 209 millimeters and evaporation of 451 millimeter. So and those projects I just showed you, that they are really common to us, and some other examples. During I'm talking, this is the biggest green facade we did in Düsseldorf. Another, also a retention roof, also same principle. We have living up here, and we have extensive green roofs up here and here in this area. The landscape architect, he had some ideas how this could look like. Terraces, water basin here, playground back there. So it's for all those people living there, it's a very decent environment. And what was said earlier, it's for those people, it's really nice to spend their free time there and not to commute out into the green. We do sloped roofs. They are not as good for retention and detention. Another one. This is a typical example for German extensive green roofs. This is the exhibition ground in Stuttgart. This is a very biodiverse green roof. The city of Stuttgart is very keen of having those very biodiverse green roof build-ups, and I think since late 1980s they have green roof policies in the city of Stuttgart, which is very good. That's Berlin, Düsseldorf again. This is an office building of Heidelberger Cement, and so on. So there are tons of examples. So what I want to show you is it's really a standard, and so nothing to worry about. Okay, thank you. Yeah, there was the other part of the question about the signals from the policymakers. What helps us a lot is if the cities and the policymakers have a clear idea what results they would like to have. So it's much easier for everybody if there's a clear statement. Okay, we want to have a maximum runoff of, let's say, 1 liter per second. Then it's clear. Then the property owner, the building planners, they can find solutions how they could achieve this goal. I think this is much better than telling you specific things about a green roof build-up, because every green roof is different, every location is different. So I think it's much better to make statements on what is the goal, what has to be achieved, and then the industry and the planners, they can define the best solution for that. I like this concept much more than clear statements like you have to bring 10 centimeters of substrate, because of course you have buildings where 10 centimeters don't work, or only work if you add extra concrete, and that's not really productive. So I think it's leave it to the intelligence of the planners and the industry to find suitable solutions, but you need to tell them what kind of result you want to have.
Uwe, there is also a question specifically for you in the Q&A. What types of vegetation is being planted on the roof? And are there any local species of plants, and do they survive also dry spells and intense temperatures, as well as increased precipitation? So it's about the types of plants and how do they react to different weather conditions.
Of course, I mean the very possible variation of plants is very broad. Let's say if we talk about an extensive system, extensive means low maintenance, but also low availability of water. So we mainly use plants which are used to low availability of water, like sedum or special herbs. And of course, they have to be local. You can't plant the same species in Finland like in Spain. So you always have to look into the natural vegetation in those countries to figure out which vegetation works. The other point is that, especially in those retention roofs, you saw a lot of water on the roofs. That means that this water is there available for the plants for evaporation and for usage. And that's our major aim, that we always keep the water on the roof to make it available to the plants. But as I said, you always have to look into the local climate situation in order to choose the right plants. There are lists of plants which work in which areas, but and which don't. But it's a very local thing, like the vegetation in the nature in your garden and so on. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Uwe, I now have some questions that are popping up. So first one will be to Mrs. Pietikainen. It is about what actually we in the previous session we discussed different interlinks also between the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive and how to promote urban green infrastructure in there. And there was a discussion about the integrating vegetated surfaces on buildings into a definition of zero emission buildings. And actually we had a guest speaker from the Climate Action who was very positive towards this idea personally. And one might also imagine that if it's clear from what we all hear, due to restoring the natural water cycles and the cooling effect, that vegetation on buildings, on green roofs and walls has a positive impact on addressing climate in cities. Shouldn't we also add this aspect clearly to a zero emission building definition?
Definitely. And now we are having the new initiatives coming from the Commission of the Circular Economy Package. And as you know, part of it is the laying down harmonized conditions for the marketing of construction products. That is sort of the sustainable buildings, and then it is the energy efficiency in the buildings. These two directives would need to define and to have the role for green infrastructure. And then it would enable, and actually it wouldn't only enable, but demand the using of the green infrastructure to achieve not only zero buildings technically, but I would put as an ambition level to put all the buildings where possible, so probably about 80% of the buildings before 2050 being energy positive. And so this is increasing the, not only decreasing consumption, but increasing the production. And I would actually tie it to the repower of the EU. You know what happens after the Russian invasion in Ukraine, and we need to get rid of the gas and fossil and other energy imports, what we are doing from Russia. And there indeed, the biggest source is the buildings and heating and cooling. And if we could do by these natural ways that are I really do hope that we can push this idea forward.
Mm-hmm. What you mentioned on positive energy buildings, I think that also in the previous session we discussed biosolar roofs, and I think this would be a perfect answer, because this is about reducing the needs for energy in buildings thanks to the green surfaces, the cooling effect, and at the same time producing energy by renewables on the buildings and using the same surfaces for both, and at the same time actually the green the cooling effect has a positive impact on efficiency of solar panels as such. So I think this
exactly
this supports even more the previous conversation we had. And frankly speaking, there is this system thinking you mentioned, that we need to make links between different things like you just did. Do you see some maybe more room in the European Parliament for this? We asked in the previous session the European Commission, they have different Green Deal groups, working groups. You are also kind of, giving different opinions to different committees, but are there maybe some ways to discuss this agenda about making buildings green with green urban infrastructure in some dedicated working groups of parliamentarians, or this is maybe happening somewhere? Is there any room maybe for making those links even more straightforward between different pieces of legislation?
I think that there should be, and there is a growing possibility for this. There are organizations like the interest groups, and one of them is GlobeEU, that tries to combine different aspects of economy and ecology together. And it just needs this kind of a dialogue between parliamentarians to see what that really is and what needs to happen, like the example that you need to bundle the wastewater, the heating and cooling, and biodiversity, and green roofs, and biosolar roofs. I just enjoyed the examples what we just had, because this is exactly what it needs to be. Plus then if you further develop it slightly, what you can actually produce also is this kind of a urban food in small scale, also in roofs, for example. You can create that kind of a recreational areas for elderly people other small children and others living in the in that building. And actually, what is solar panel is giving the shelter for the sun and rain and all that, and extends the use period of those areas while producing the energy and giving the possibility to master the plants and whatever. So that sort of shows that it has a multiple benefits we would need to take into account and on the use. And it isn't that expensive if you compare it building a nuclear power plant. With that money, you can repair quite a number of urban areas to change the buildings to be like this.
Yes, exactly. So the question is, you mentioned that it's not expensive. So now I would maybe ask some questions from Q&A on incentives and on the cost. So one question is about what kind of incentives can we put in place for households and industries to install green roofs on their buildings? And maybe the question could go to Mr. Namur, who is dealing with those topics in Grenoble. What would you see from the city level? What kind of incentives could be given also maybe from the national level to cities? What kind of incentives could be given from the European level so that you can expand your agenda to green your city even more? I think you are on mute, Mr. Namur.
Sorry for that. Yeah, in fact, we face several, of course, issues regarding green infrastructure, and the cost is one of them. Of course, green roof cost on average is 30% more than more conventional roof. Green roofs are maintained at least once a year. It is more than the maintenance of a gravel roof that is that need an intervention every 3 or 4 years. For the facade vegetated, we need maintenance by climbers every year. Or every 2 years or 4 years maximum, and it is therefore much more frequent than conventional facade maintenance that need maintenance every 10 years. The installation price was greatly depending also on the type of plants, the age of and the support, and it is necessary expect at least 800 euros for classic project or simple spiked plants, while it costs between 8 and 12,000 euro for a project with support. And for many owners, including the city of Grenoble, revegetation is an additional cost during construction or renovation operation. For condominium or companies, the benefit of this expense is not always noticeable or understood, and there is no law requiring the reduction of the volume of rainwater discharge into the sewer of existing building. Apart from the program that we have that is called Digitalize your city, that grant for 8,000 euro for private owners to set up a green facade from the street. Private owners cannot benefit from any financial assistance to green their building. So cost is clearly a difficulty. We have other difficulty like structural constraint. For example, current building that are not green were not designed to support the weight of greening. The existing gravel can generally be replaced by an extensive roof of 10 to 12 centimeters thick. In other words, for Grenoble, 90% of the case, what we have identified as a potential roof, and there is 96 hectares that could be green in Grenoble, and only only 10% could be green with extensive greening. And in case of rehabilitation works, it is possible to reinforce the structure of the building and to be able to install semi-intensive roof, which are more efficient, but at a significant cost. For new construction, of course, we have the ability to anticipate the weight of green roof. It stays nevertheless an additional cost for the manufacturer. Another constraint that we have are coming from prejudice, common prejudice and negative perception associated with nature in the city. We can hear it attracts insects, mosquitoes, wasps, or rats, and while in fact on roof greening eliminate stagnant water point on bare roof, terrace, or in gravel. So another prejudice is we can hear that it damage the walls, and this reputation for climbing plants generally comes from the fact that ivy or Virginia creepers spontaneously grow in the city on poorly maintained buildings and leave behind their ending system on the walls or highlight an existing state of disrepair. So in fact, any work facade greening is designed according to this existing constraint. So this is a kind of example of constraint that, of course, cost is one of the main ones.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And regarding the costs and how investors react to costs, Uwe has already answered in written the question about the cost, but maybe Uwe, you could briefly, maybe orally answer this question and then say how actually investors react to those costs. Is it something problematic, or is this something what Mrs. Pietikainen said, that actually the costs versus benefits, it's the result is quite clear that the cost-benefit analysis is very positive for vegetated surfaces on buildings.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, I can answer on that. So the cost, of course, definitely depend on where the building is. If we have a building on a Mediterranean island, it's definitely another cost than compared to a building in Grenoble or in the middle of Germany or in the Netherlands. So for, let's say, if we take middle of Europe in a country where we have a developed green roof market, then the cost starts something at 20 euros per square meter for a decent roof size. Decent roof size for us is about 1,000 square meters. The bigger it gets, the cheaper it gets. But this is the price for green roofs. And Mr. Namur, he just stated the prices for facades, and this is that's something totally different. This is a factor 10 or even more. So green roofs are relatively cheap compared to green walls. But let's say if we are talking on those intensive green roofs, which is a garden on a roof on a installations are much higher. They go up to 250 euros. This depends on the plants, the size of the plants, the pavement which is used, how much electricity is in there, how many lights, and so on and so on. So this definitely can go up to quite impressive numbers. But this is not only the green roof, then it's the total outside living room which is created then. So a lot of cost is not does not go into the green itself. It goes into equipment and so on. This is from the cost side. Of course, the investors, it depends what we are talking about. If we are talking about a 50,000 square meter logistic hall which needs to get a green roof, of course every investor doesn't want to have it, because at the end it costs money and all the benefits are not on his side. These are public benefits, and this is all this discussion which we have with the price for CO2, for example. Every benefit which is to the general public, and if you have to pay it on your own, it's always a problem in the discussion. So in those cases, of course, subsidies help, or just the strict regulations help. In the sense, if you want to build a 50,000 square meter production or logistic hall, then you have to have a green roof. Otherwise, you don't get a building permission. So then the discussion about the price, or the discussion about extra cost has stopped. On the other side, talking about those other type of roofs for this recreational factors, we never have discussions on prices for those, because without this green spaces, you can't use the building, you can't sell it, you can't, nobody wants to live there, nobody wants to work there. So in those aspects of green roofs, we don't have real discussions on prices. And last point, at least for some countries, for example, for Germany, but also for the Netherlands, you get some kind of subsidies. For example, for Germany, you get a reduction in stormwater fee if you have a green roof. So at the end of the day, it saves some money. It doesn't pay all the green roof, but it saves some money. And maybe last point, let's say a green roof, it depends on the building, but a green roof, based on our calculation, is something between 0.5 and 1% of the total building cost. So it's not really something which changed the whole picture.
Exactly. So I think that we managed to demystify the question about the costs. And now let's come back to the benefits, as you mentioned, Tove, because that's actually now the key aspect. So we would like to use maybe the presence of Mrs. Higgins from the Commission here and answer a couple of questions. So looking at all what we heard from the speakers, can urban green infrastructure be considered a solution to stormwater management and urban runoff to address the goals of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive? And I would also like to make a link to what we saw in Uwe's presentation on the total water balance of the projects, when we see that the runoff reaches maximum 10%, these are the 70% of evaporation, 10% of runoff, 20% of infiltration. We heard also from Mr. Namur about 80% of green area ratio. I think that these could be perhaps some useful indications for the revision of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, since of course, the link between what is happening on the building and around the building is quite clear to the problems to solve of overflows and runoff. And there was another aspect that I think could be quite interesting from Anna Zakrisson, who mentioned those standards for measuring and monitoring. So how would you comment on all of those ideas and remarks, Mrs. Higgins?
Okay, there's quite a lot there. I think to start, just to clarify that the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive does not cover separate stormwater systems. It's only where there is rainfall runoff connected into urban wastewater networks. Urban wastewater, is defined in the current directive as domestic wastewater, some industrial perhaps, and possibly rainfall runoff. So historically, I suppose, and continuing in older urban areas, there is combined sewage, which is a mixture of storm and wastewater. And that's just to be clear, that's the remit of the directive. And often there are different operators in urban areas that are responsible for different parts of the drainage network and the wastewater network. So to reinforce what I already said was that we can see that green, blue and grey infrastructure, perhaps in a combination, is possibly the way forward. Urban areas, by their nature, are very complex, and there is a balance to be achieved between costs and benefits. What we do at directive level is look at those at a very global EU level, but there are very detailed design considerations that need to be made specific to a particular urban area, and that's where we see the value as one of our options as the integrated approach. So it's letting those experts who understand the systems and understand the limitations and complexity work out the optimal solution. taking into account all of those factors. So yes, where stormwater, it's clear that it can be removed from the system. Obviously, it's a great benefit, but it won't always be the case. That, you know, I think, you know, even some of the examples on roof design highlighted that, you know, I think there was 10% mentioned for one design, you know, still needed to be discharged, whether that went to a combined or a separate system, I don't know. Again, total water balance. Yeah, again, this is getting into detailed design specifics, which is not what the directive is about. The directive is an end of pipe directive that really focuses on treatment where it's needed, and also the overarching, you know, other policy legislation, including the Water Framework Directive, EGIDay, etc. But yeah, we do appreciate obviously the benefits that accrue and how they can be accounted for. And again, you know, even for urban wastewater networks and wastewater treatment plants, we do not set standards as it is. This, you know, we're technology neutral, and there would be no intention to get into that level of detail going forward. I hope that answers your questions.
Mm-hmm. And just maybe I'm wondering, because since we are talking about the networks of stormwater treatment, this is what the directive is directly dealing with, from what you described. Maybe we could think of this water energy nexus a bit more, just to find the right link to what we just discussed, because the link is definitely there. Now it's the question how to translate into the legislation, specific legislation. How about introducing some national targets for utilities for energy saving, since basically via solutions that we discuss, we can reduce the energy use of utilities for stormwater management.
Yeah, I think what we've previously said in our evaluation is somewhere between 0.8 and 1% of energy use across the EU is related to wastewater. But just to highlight that, you know, typically most of that goes into wastewater treatment. It's an energy intensive activity rather than the collection systems. So a lot of collection systems have, you know, are drain, so they don't require pumping. There is pumping requirements. There are opportunities, obviously, in the less stormwater that is introduced into an urban wastewater system, whether it's the network and then ultimately the treatment plant, and the less clean urban or the less requirements for treating of stormwater because of source control. Obviously that's a plus. So where that volume of flow doesn't get into the network, or where urban runoff, which obviously has a number of constituents which are of concern, is treated, obviously there are benefits. We are considering energy to some extent in this current directive, and I think what we would have outlined in our stakeholder conference in October, which was when we finished our stakeholder engagement piece, you know, one option would be around energy audits. You know, that's something that utilities need to do. You know, there needs to be a greater awareness within utilities of where their energy usage is, and to make decisions on that basis. Engineering decisions are, you know, a complicated mixture of technical, environmental, and economic constraints, and that balance, you know, that decision making needs a balanced approach going forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I can see that there is a suggestion from Jure Szulmi from the World Green Infrastructure Network that maybe we should have information how much stormwater is handled in the EU by joint stormwater and domestic sewage, and how much by separate systems, so that we can see how much of the problem can be handled with the green infrastructure. I don't know what would be your answer to that question. Do we have such data, first of all, Mrs. Higgins?
Well, again, the reporting requirements for member states to the Commission on regarding urban wastewater treatment directive are defined, and they're quite limited, and they don't include in scope lengths of sewers, and again, to restate, like the stormwater networks are not, unless they're connecting into a urban wastewater network, are not considered under this directive. I think in our evaluation in 2019, we did make good estimates of what we would expect the balance between separate and combined systems are. And again, you know, based on the remit of the directive, you know, some of those responsibilities, you know, can be set at national or municipal level. But we do, you know, I think, for instance, if there is integrated planning of networks going forward, the basics of that are good data. And in order to develop those type of integrated planning approaches, the first step is obviously for those involved to actually understand what existing assets are in place, as well as what other constraints there are in terms of the existing urban environment to move forward, so that, you know, predictive modeling, real-time control, all of those tools can be used to optimize the performance of the networks. So yes, you know, yeah.
Thank you very much. So before we finish, I would like to ask if anyone still wants to make any closing remark. It would be like 1 minute per person. If you would like to still signal something, Mrs. Pietikainen, maybe some closing words from your side. And I see Mrs. Zakrisson would also like to take the floor.
Well, on my behalf, I only would like to thank you for this opportunity and this very useful, pragmatic and forward-looking event what we have had. And knowing how much work it sort of requires, that this concept of a green infrastructure is all over the place and well understood. I hope that we can all stay in contact and create this kind of a broader network for green infrastructure and greening urban and other areas. And please always be in contact me or send an email information or whatever you would be that would help my work on here. So thank you, and have a wonderful the rest of the day and the weekend.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Zakrisson, you actually mentioned some ideas for measuring monitoring. You could maybe be potentially one of the persons to stay in touch, as Mrs. Pietikainen said.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for this event. This is exactly what Europe needs, I think. So I would just wanted to say that we have a white paper in economic case study for what I spoke about, detention. Green roof detention. So if anybody's interested about that, then please just contact me at anna@greenroofdiagnostics.com or just through the Green Roof Diagnostics website, and I can send that over to you.
Super.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Namur, any closing remarks from your side? You are on mute.
Sorry for that again. Thank you very much for this very interesting panel. I just want to invite all of you to come to Grenoble, more especially this year, because because we are capital, green capital, European green capital this year. We have a lot of events regarding environmental, political. This is also for us a showroom. Project to discuss together, to share about the good practices in all the cities, all the countries, and all the citizens. Very good proposition of innovation in order to start to make the transition that we need in order to adapt the town to the climate change that we are facing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And it sounds like a great proposal to celebrate the European Year of Greener Cities, actually, from your side. Ready-made, basically. Thank you very much. Uwe, what would you like to say to some final words from your side?
Yeah, thank you. I'm really glad that we have meetings like that and conferences like that, because this really pushes the idea of blue-green infrastructure very much. And being in the market since so long, it's really hard, or it's really very good to see how much interest with the topic now gets. 10 years ago, we were lucky if there was one short notice on TV, and nowadays you have it every second week on TV. So this makes everybody very proud, and I think we are on a very good track, and we should cooperate for the future. And there are so many good ideas, and just the cooperation with the many people helps to bring this idea to a very broad audience, and that's our job now, and that's I'm looking forward to do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And exactly. And Mrs. Higgins, I think maybe you could tell us as a final remark, how could we, experts, industry, researchers, support you in those last weeks, months before the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive is published?
Yeah, well, to start, I'd like to just thank everybody for a very rich discussion today. It's been very informative. It's always good for us to be aware of the state of the art and what's possible, and where to focus our ambitions. What I would say is that our stakeholder engagement finished last October, so we're not in discussion mode anymore. We closed our stakeholder discussions at our stakeholder conference, as I'd outlined earlier. So we're now busily working away internally to develop a proposal which we will present to the Parliament and to the Council in the coming months. So obviously it'll be published, and there will be visibility of it going forward, but there won't be any engagement in terms of further developing our thoughts with stakeholders externally at this moment.
Thank you, that's quite clear. But okay, then the proposals, once it's published, it will be subject to negotiation, so the dialogue will continue also with the members of the European Parliament. So it's it's to be continued, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. I would like to thank all the speakers for great contributions, to all the participants for their questions.